Good afternoon, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I can go on forever, as Mr. Singh said earlier, so I'll cut it to 30 minutes. How many of you want to become entrepreneurs? Okay. Okay, you are already entrepreneurs, right? Many of you. So basically, I'll tell you something about what is a stock exchange, why you need to do things you need to do. And of course, some of you are entrepreneurs, probably most of you are not. So I'll tell you a journey of mine in entrepreneurship so that you get to figure out that it's not about success, because what happens is when we look at Amitabh Bachchan, we think it's a good career move to become an actor. And so Amitabh Bachchan came to Mumbai, he slept on footpath, and then finally got his break, and then he became successful. And there are probably after him, 10 million people came to Mumbai to become actors, and probably one or two became stars. Others all became extras or at most character artists, right? So basically, when we look at successful entrepreneurs, it is also like that we think it's in we aspire for that and we want to emulate them, but effectively only few will actually succeed. And the biggest lesson I have learned in my life is if you don't try, if you don't buy lottery ticket, you will not get lottery. So finally you have to end up buying lottery ticket. So when do you want to buy, how do you want to buy, that is your choice. But if you don't start on the entrepreneurship journey, an employee has an issue. Many employees get stock options, so there is an upside to that. But usually an employee works for a salary. The salary can be reasonably high, but effectively, if the business does well because of you, you don't get much except your salary. There is no upside. Your upside is limited. Your downside is high because you can be thrown out of the job. And so effectively, you need to worry about the optionality. In last 20, 30 years, one single technology has changed the world, and that is information technology. It has changed the world, but more importantly, it has changed India. It has changed India's perspective about itself, and it has changed world's perspective about India. Around 91, 92, I used to go to US, and the news, if you took the newspapers, probably once in a week there would be a news item on India, and that would be about cows roaming on road, pictures of that, or snake charmers and stuff like that. There was no big deal about India, but since then, today if you go to US, most of the news is about jobs going to India. India has become very large, just large, and also when we grew up, many of you are younger, not what I call the children of pre-91 era. We grew up pre-91. We were all afraid. We were all not willing to take on life. We were all cloistered. We were all claustrophobic in a sense. India before 91 was a different world. You couldn't go abroad. Getting visa was a tough thing. Getting foreign exchange was even tougher. And have you heard a song called Around the World in $8? Actually, that was a reality. If you had to go out, not in 90s, but in 70s and 60s, if you had to go out, you were getting $8 maximum per day. And that kind of numbers, people had to go out. And effectively, India, when it became independent, it started looking within rather than trying to connect to the world because of the history we had. People came to trade with us, they subjugated us. So when we became independent, we thought we shouldn't trade with people. We shouldn't work with anyone else. We should just become self-sufficient. Of course, Gandhiji also had a great role to play in that kind of framework because of self-sufficiency and all those things. But effectively, we became very, very inward-looking from 1947 to 1991. And that I called sort of the pre-liberalization era. And most of us, if we got a white guy before 90s, it used to be like a big thing. And we used to think that the guy speaks English, right? So he must be brilliant. And so those were the days, and now nobody cares, right? I mean, all of you, at least 25 years I have worked with a lot of white guys and a lot of other colors, and somewhere India and Indians seem to be the smartest. And that came out because of exposure, post 91. None of us had that kind of exposure. And there was another issue that many of us were not from the castes which were traditionally business families. They were people, some of us were from the business families or the caste which were into the businesses. But most of us were kind of trained, especially people coming to IIMs and IITs and all, were trained to take jobs. I mean, if you are good, you become a doctor or engineer. Probably if your parents have more money, also go to IIMs or go to any other MBA college and then take a government job. That was how the framework was. So none of us thought about becoming entrepreneurs. And so similarly for me, in 91 when I came out of IMC, I took a job at IDBI, at Industrial Development Bank of India. In those days, it was not a bank. It was what we call financial institution. And I kind of didn't think twice because I thought financial institutions help. And we had, in IMC, we used to have a good leftist group. And I had taken a lot of courses on development economics and stuff like that. Nowadays, you might not have heard of the development economics part of it. But those days, we used to have development economics and theories of how the development economics works. We had great teachers. But effectively, we wanted to work for the nation's development. And I kind of moved and started working for IDBI from campus. And I was doing what we call project finance, that you had to evaluate projects, figure out the profitability in case there is going to be one. And then if it's profitable, then you have to recommend to the board and the committees about funding the companies. And interestingly, I was, when I just joined at 91, in 91, and so I was on the cusp. Computers were coming newly to India. Not many people were aware that computers will change the life the way they have done. But there was a big fear that when computers come, they will take away jobs. So IDBI also had a similar issue. And IDBI spent around 40 crores to computerize itself, that is, get PCs on every officer's desk. And they got the PCs on every officer's desk, and suddenly there was a strike. All officers went on strike, everyone else went on strike. And it lasted for almost 30, 40 days. Everyone thought that computers will take away their job, and everyone was trying to oppose computerization those days. Especially people who were in the jobs. People who were outside the jobs had no clue, right? So they would do anything. But basically, in that context, I was one of the few guys who had actually worked on personal computers before. And I could do programming, I could do worksheets and stuff like that. And so I kept on doing things on project finance, which was considered impossible. Because in project finance, there is you have to do projections of companies' balance sheets and profit and loss accounts and stuff like that. And so, and those would go on basically about 50, 100 pages, just the projections. And everything had to be done with calculator. If you made a small mistake, the entire thing will have to be redone and so on and so forth. And so I would create a spreadsheet. There used to be Lotus 123, not Excel had not arrived by then. But I would create a spreadsheet and I'll take a printout. I'll go to my boss, and if boss is not interested, he will tell you that change assumption by, say, if the raw material goes up by 5%, what will be the new framework? And so he would think that this guy will come after 1 month, because if you have to do it manually, you would have to sort of take long time before you will come back. And after 10 minutes, I'll be going back again saying, now sir, it's all 10% raw material change. And he was totally aghast, saying, how did you come back so fast? I just sent you back. And so those were the days, but kind of a reputation spread in IDBI that this guy knows computer. And I also started typing although I had not done typing as sort of in training, but I started typing, and we had to type large notes. There used to be clerks and there are typists. If in PSUs in those days, if you took away a file and put it on another table, the peon will come and say, no, you have done my job, you can't do that. And so when I started typing, all the typists started feeling bad about it because they stopped getting the overtime and so on and so forth. But somewhere along the line, a reputation spread, and in '92, when Harshad Mehta scam happened, government wanted to set up a stock exchange which was supposed to be different, more transparent, not owned by brokers and so on and so forth. And so they selected 5 people from IDBI, and they were all stalwarts who had worked in IDBI before, who had great achievements. I was just 1.5 years into the job, and one of them, who was much smarter, another IIM graduate, he decided to drop out because he thought a bureaucratic stock exchange cannot work. And so, and he was already having a great time in IDBI itself, so he didn't want to spoil his name by associating with the project which was certainly going to fail. And that's how somebody who knew technology. That's how I was selected at age 23, 24. And the project was huge, and I had no choice, neither I knew what to do. I mean, you can actually deny a job because you were just into the job, and how do you deny anything, right? So, and it was interesting. So I started working on it, and I was the youngest guy. So whatever my seniors couldn't do, I had to do. And whatever my seniors didn't want to do, I had to do. So they would say, chai leke aao, so order tea, so I will have to go and get tea, Or they will say, construction, interior decoration, somebody has to do, so why don't you do it? So I'll end up doing it, And not that I was trained as an engineer in civil or architectural, I was a mechanical engineer. But similarly, they also gave me work like getting import certificates. So those days, for importing anything, you had to actually have import certificates. So I had to go out into the market, figure out where the import certificates are, get them registered in our name. And this was a PSU, but still we had to do all this. And so I learned a lot. But 2-3 things which came my way, of course, I learned interior decoration, I learned many other things. But the technology, I mean, I was only engineer, so I had to do the technology. And I was told that we are going to do a satellite telecom network. So can we do satellite telecom network? And nobody had worked in India on SATCOM before. And so, and satellite is, there are different types of satellites, but the one which India uses even now is called geostationary satellite. It's around 36,000 kilometers on top, and it stays on the same place above India all the time. It doesn't shift. There are other satellites which actually change the space vis-a-vis the Earth, but those geostationary actually stays on stationary position vis-a-vis a particular place. And so I started reading books on telecom and so on and so forth. That's how literally I learned telecom, because I was a mechanical engineer. I had done a little bit of programming and stuff, but doing stuff, doing a SATCOM was extremely new. Nobody had done it in India, even worldwide. It was just coming up. And there we had to issue an RFP for worldwide telecom network, as well as for the technology, the software and so on and so forth. And finally, we ended up doing it. Why I'm telling you this is, anything that comes your way, don't think it is small or it is not part of your career progress which you have thought about in life. Anything that comes your way accidentally, by chance, take it. In my case, I was happy-go-lucky. I had no plan, I had no ambitions in terms of becoming something. So I was kind of floating, and whatever came my way, I ended up doing. But it has been a great journey because I didn't resist anything. I was not feeling that this work of doing interior decoration is bad, or a work of doing LAN is bad, or work of doing SATCOM is bad. It basically, it was interesting. You kept on doing, you kept on learning newer things. And when the exchange had to be started, nobody thought it will be so successful. But within 1 year, it became larger than BSE. And I was handling the equities market. Why I was handling equities market is also interesting, that I was only Gujarati. And equities market was supposed to be a bad thing. And the debt market, the bond trading is the banker's game. Equity market is dhoti topi game, you know. And so that's how this guy's junior sent him there. And that's how I got into equities. But equities became the most successful. And then as soon as it became successful, I was told that why don't you do another project? So that somebody else, some other important person can actually handle the equities now that we are successful. And so again, I didn't even understand what was the meaning of it. But I started working on a new project called derivatives in 95 and within few months, the new guy who had come to run equities ended up creating, because it was high tech, running the newer markets were very, very high tech. And the guy was from the older version of life of the floor-based trading and all. So he couldn't handle it. Again, it came back to me. But I started working on a new project called derivatives. And from 95 to 2000, why we couldn't set up derivatives is because the laws would not allow the index trading or even derivatives to actually trade in India, because there was a law called SCRA, which it still is there. And it didn't allow specifically futures trading. And that's why other exchanges had actually created a framework called Badla. And they were running similar stuff, but not exactly the same thing. And that's how derivatives sort of came into being. As in when the law got passed around 2000, the law had to be changed. And that happened around 2000 after Ketan Parekh's scam. So effectively, when I was doing all this, I had become pretty big in terms of the position, but there was no money because it was a PSU kind of a situation. The salaries were like in 2000, I had the take home of around 8,000 rupees. And I had large house, car, everything, but my take home was around 8,000 after cutting the loans and everything. And my wife, who was a doctor, she came first time home and she, she was studying then, but she came and said, but if you are so big, why is your salary so small? Because it was lesser than her stipend. And she was doing her MD then. And so I said, that is how the PSUs work. But then I realized that I need to do something at age 30, 31. You had seen all, you had done all, but you are still part of the same small thing, sort of a cocoon, which got successful accidentally. It was not a design success. It's just that the technology was right, the competition made mistakes, and you could actually do things, and you became successful because of that. And so I said I need to do something on my own. And in 2000, there was a huge rage over e-commerce. What is today is much smaller compared to what was happening those days. And I started an e-commerce company called exchangenext.com. It was funded by Reliance Group, and the idea was that you need to create an infrastructure to create many exchanges on B2B e-commerce. So, for example, petrochemicals or steel or cement or any other commodities, you should be able to trade like you trade stock markets. But it would also allow you to do tracking of your consignments, money movement for consignments, and so on and so forth. The e-commerce still is more confined to the consumer side, not the B2B side. So we started creating a infrastructure for setting up many exchanges, and the idea was that once I set up the infrastructure, many more exchanges would come up, and those will have different entrepreneurs. They will kind of use our infrastructure to handle this. And so we started the first exchange called Petrochemical Next, petrochemnext.com. And then we started another exchange called steelnext.com. There was one more exchange called papernext.com, and all of them had different entrepreneurs. And I was kind of giving service to all of them. So I was like a horizontal, and they were the verticals. In 2001, we started Petchem Next, and Reliance said, now that e-commerce has gone out of favor, we don't think it's required to be funded any longer. And I had now 100 people staff and no job and nothing in hand. And so at age 30, you were top of the world. At 31, you have nothing in hand, and now what to do? And you have to take care of 100 people. And so, of course, Reliance guys were good, and they said, you seem to be sincere people, so why don't you start working on telecom project? And so we started being helpful in telecom projects. Our salaries were intact and so on and so forth. And then at some stage, I became the Chief Information Officer of Reliance Telecom, and then later on Reliance Industries, and then Public Relations Head, and also the Mumbai Indians Head, and so on and so forth. But when I was in Reliance, still the bug of entrepreneurship had not gone. You had failed once, but you still thought the entrepreneurship taught you a lot, and you still wanted to try that. And so whatever I was earning, I was actually investing into another company called Marketplace Technologies. And how it kind of came about is because derivatives, after I left, derivatives were allowed to operate in India, but I kept on marketing about it. So brokers would say that since you started this derivatives game, why don't you give us softwares for them? And there were people who would give the front end, that is order routing softwares, but nobody would give them back office softwares. And so they said, why don't you create this software for back office? And so we created the software for back office for the stockbrokers. And I kept on funding that company. I also made my employers aware that I'm running this company. It's not in some sense mine. It is in my wife's name, but my salary is going there, and effectively people are buying the software because of my name. So one day I was chatting up with the chairman of Reliance, and I said, sir, this is how the company has now become big, 100 people. And somewhere along the line you will start hearing about it. So I'm telling you that I have this company, and if you want, I will drop out of the company, or if you want, basically I can resign. And he said, that's fine. Whatever you have achieved is good, but remember one thing, you are working for Reliance, and anything happens bad, it is going to hurt Reliance's name. So whatever you do, since you have already gone so far, you continue, but don't spoil Reliance name. And that was the advice that came from him. And he had the ability to accept that there is an employee of his who has actually opened up a firm while working. And of course, I used to work 24/7, so I had not even gone once to the company's office and so on and so forth. It had already become a 100 people company because my ex-colleagues from NSE were kind of running it. But effectively, sometimes when you become sort of big, you have employees, and you want to teach them entrepreneurship, you also have to accept that they can become entrepreneurs, not remain your employees. And in 2007, I sold the company to somebody who promised to give money after 1 year. The money didn't come, and the company came back later on with losses. And although I was basically earning a lot, the company had literally 50 to 60 lakh rupees of salary bill every month. And that was basically huge compared to my sort of ability to handle it. And 2007-8, things went down. No broker would pay you anything, even maintenance charges and all. And all the employees started running away, saying, now we are not going to get our salaries. The CEO said, I am resigning. 2-3 other people said, we are resigning. They already had stakes in the company. And now you had this company where still 120 people are there. You have nobody to run it. You don't have that type of money to handle it. But whatever money I had, I called the senior people of the company, literally 50, 60 of them in a room like this on one Sunday, and said that I have not been running this company. These people were running, now they are going. And if you guys think that this company is not going to run, probably you can leave. But I am putting my own savings, which will handle 2 years' salary for all of you. So if you have worries about your salary is not coming, please stay here, because for 2 years nothing is going to happen, because we have the enough We have enough money. I have put it in the company. And now you guys can go ahead, try to develop the business or at least get the maintenance charges and so on and so forth. The market had gone down from 22,000 to 8,000. Every broker was almost bankrupt and nobody was paying. But slowly market came up, they started paying up and the company came to good health. And then 2009, we again wanted to sell the company. BSE bought the company and put a condition at the end saying I have to work for them for 1 year. So that's how I came to BSE. And I remained there now with 7th year. I became CEO. I joined as a deputy CEO and I became CEO in 2012 end November. And now it's around 6.5 years since I have been with BSE. So in entrepreneurial journey, you will have too many ups and downs, too many things, but that is the most exhilarating journey. So as and when you fail, don't think it's a failure. You have to learn from it, move forward. And if success comes, that doesn't mean you will not fail in future. So somewhere on the line, you'll have to take life in equanimity. So I hope I gave you a perspective on what it takes to become an entrepreneur while working, because many of you can leave the job, but I didn't have that luxury. I had to do both together, and somehow I ended up making reasonable money, which ensures that I don't have to worry about my retirement. I am practically retired from monetary perspective. So whatever I do is out of volition now. So hope this was useful. Thank you very much.